All right, let's dive into another deep dive. This time, it's Creepshow from 1982, a real classic for horror fans. It's basically an anthology film that feels like those old EC horror comics come to life.
Hmm?
The ones with the gruesome twists and that kind of dark humor.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It really nails that whole comic book vibe, doesn't it? All those vibrant colors and over-the-top gore. Plus, there's this playful, kind of morbid sense about it all. It's all there.
Exactly. And you can't forget those transitions between the segments, those comic book panel transitions. It really makes you feel like you're watching a comic book come to life. But before we even get into those individual stories, one thing that really grabs you is the film's structure. It's not just like a bunch of random scary stories thrown together, right? It's all connected by that framing story about Billy, this young boy, and his, well, pretty abusive father, Stan.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. That framing device, it's like the key. It adds this whole other layer, almost like metafiction, because you're basically watching Billy's horror comic come to life. Like all these twisted tales are coming straight from his imagination, all fueled by the comics he loves.
And that's what makes it even creepier. Like it blurs the lines between what's real and what's fantasy. You're left thinking, wait, how much what I'm seeing is actually happening and how much is just from Billy's messed up life?
Exactly. And it adds this psychological depth, too. We see how Billy's using those horror stories, like a way to cope with all the crap he's going through.
So let's jump into the first segment, Father's Day.
Hmm.
The setup seems pretty basic. It's Father's Day and there's a family reunion. But hold on, because things take a seriously dark turn when the ghost of the father, Nathan Grantham, decides to come back for some payback. And let me tell you, this ghost is not messing around.
Yeah, talk about holding a grudge. This segment is a perfect example of how Creepshow blends horror with this really dark humor. You have this happy family getting together, and boom, it turns into complete chaos and bloodshed. The irony of a celebration becoming a massacre doesn't miss the viewer, I'll tell you that.
Oh, and that moment with the Father's Day cake, I mean, come on.
Whoa.
You know things are about to get real when they bring out a cake with a knife still stuck in it.
Absolutely. It's this perfect mix of gruesome imagery and morbid humor, which is something Creepshow just nails.
Then we have The Lonesome Death of Geordie Farrell, which is like a total shift from the straight-up horror of Father's Day. This one is more of a tragic comedy, and there's a lot of body horror going on, which is, well, it's pretty intense.
And who better to play Geordie Verrill than Stephen King himself? He brings this bumbling, naive charm to the character. Like you almost want to cheer for him, even though he keeps making terrible decisions.
And that transformation scene, oh man. Watching Geordie slowly become covered by this alien vegetation, it's both fascinating and horrifying at the same time. The makeup effects they used are fantastically gross.
It just shows you how committed they were to using practical effects, Even by today's standards, they hold up really well. There's a realness to them that you don't always get with CGI.
I totally agree. And The Lonesome Death of Geordie Verrill, it's like a warning about getting too greedy. Like, be careful what you wish for, because Geordie's desire for wealth and fame, it ultimately destroys him.
It's that classic theme, isn't it? Sometimes we get so caught up in what we want that we can't see the consequences.
And speaking of consequences, let's move on to something to tide you over. This is probably the most suspenseful segment in the whole film. We have Richard Vickers, this rich and insanely jealous husband who comes up with this cruel revenge plan for his wife Becky and her lover Harry Wentworth.
Oh man, this segment is like a masterclass in building tension. The way Romero films those beach scenes with the tide slowly coming in, and you know that Becky and Harry are buried up to their necks, it's so effective.
And that whole ticking clock thing, it just adds to the intensity. You're watching the minutes go by, and you know they're running out of time.
And just when you think it can't get any worse, bam, we get that zombie twist ending. It's shocking and satisfying all at the same time.
Richard Vickers thinks he's gotten away with it, but then, wham, he learns that death is just the beginning. That ending shot of him on the monitor, trapped forever. Chilling.
Yeah, it reminds you that what you do has consequences. Even after death, Richard has to face the horrors he inflicted on others.
So far, we've got vengeful ghosts, body horror, and a terrifying tale of revenge gone wrong. Creepshow definitely keeps its promise of chills and thrills.
But it's not all darkness and gloom. Creepshow knows how to have some fun too, and that's where our next segment comes in, the crate. Let's head over to a university campus and see what's hiding in that mysterious crate, shall we?
Let's do it. I hear there's a creature with a serious appetite in there. And maybe a few annoying characters who might just get what's coming to them.
Now that sounds like a good time. We'll be back after a quick break.
All right, we're back. And we were just about to take a peek inside the crate. That's the fourth terrifying tale in Creepshow, right?
Yeah. This one takes us to a university campus where this janitor finds a mysterious crate tucked away under a stairwell. Been there for over 100 years, can you believe that? You just know something nasty's got to be lurking inside.
Oh, you better believe it. This segment is a total classic creature feature with a monster that's, well, kind of terrifying, but also strangely endearing. It's got this furry look and those glowing eyes.
Yeah.
Creepy, yeah, but also kind of cute, weirdly.
It's like a monster teddy bear that just happens to crave human flesh. But before we even get to the big reveal of this creature, we got to talk about Wilma. You know, the super obnoxious wife of Professor Dexter Stanley. She is like the definition of an entitled, nagging spouse. Ugh, Wilma, right. She's constantly putting Dexter down, and basically anyone else who crosses her path. You can't help but feel a little, well, satisfied when she ends up being the creature's first victim.
I think we all saw that coming, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the way she goes out, let's just say it's a pretty fitting end for someone who seemed to enjoy making everyone else miserable.
It just shows how Creepshow balances the horror with some humor, you know? Even when you have these gruesome deaths, there's this sense of playfulness, almost like a theatricality, that keeps things from getting too dark.
Totally. It's like you're watching a horror comic come to life.
Yeah.
With all the exaggerated emotions and that visual flair. And speaking of exaggerated emotions, we got to talk about the last segment. They're creeping up on you.
Now, this one is pure nightmare fuel, especially if you've ever been afraid of insects. We're introduced to Upson Pratt. He's this reclusive businessman, totally germophobic, lives in this sterile penthouse apartment, obsessed with cleanliness and control. That's him.
Yeah, he's built this hermetically sealed world for himself, thinking he can shut out all the chaos and dirt from the outside. But little does he know, the real danger is already inside his fancy apartment.
The roaches, they're everywhere. And not your average tiny roaches either. These are big, nasty, and they just don't quit. Like a force of nature taking over Pratt's perfectly controlled little world.
The way Romero films those roaches, swarming all over everything, crawling into every little crack, it makes your skin crawl just watching it.
It's such a great example of how Creepshow uses practical effects to create this really visceral, unsettling experience. You can almost feel those roaches on you, you know? And Pratt just loses it, descends into madness as these things take over. It's terrifying and kind of sad at the same time.
He's completely lost control, and all his attempts to get it back are just pointless. That final image of him covered in roaches, his body consumed by them. Man, that's disturbing.
A fitting end for a guy who tried so hard to control everything, wouldn't you say? In the end, nature wins. And in this case, nature is a bunch of relentless roaches.
So we've got these 5 chilling stories, each one exploring different sides of horror, the darker parts of what it means to be human. But the thing that ties it all together is Billy and his comic book.
Oh, totally. Remember that opening scene? Billy gets in trouble with his dad for reading Creepshow comics. Stan, the dad, tosses the comic in the trash, tells Billy that horror stories will rot his brain. But throughout the movie, it's actually Stan who's the real horror show.
He's abusive, vengeful, and let's be honest, he gets what's coming to him. And that last scene where Billy uses a voodoo doll from the comic to get revenge on his dad, it's like a reminder that sometimes fiction can become reality.
It brings that framing story full circle, you know?
Yeah.
We started with Billy escaping into his comic book world, and now he's using that world to face the real horror in his life.
And that shot of the creep at the end, holding the next issue of Creepshow, with this mischievous look in his eye. Talk about a cliffhanger. It makes you want more.
Like Billy's journey into the world of horror isn't over yet. It's a perfect example of how Creepshow embraces that fun, playful side of horror.
Speaking of fun, we got to talk about the people who made this creepy carnival a reality. George Romero, the guy behind Night of the Living Dead, directed Creepshow, and his style is all over it.
Romero's a legend in horror. You can't deny his influence. He's got this talent for mixing social commentary with those visceral thrills, and Creepshow is no different. It's a fun, entertaining ride, but it also makes you think about things like revenge, karma, and the consequences of your actions.
And the cast. Oh man, we've got icons like Ted Danson, Leslie Nielsen, Adrienne Barbeau, Ed Harris, even Stephen King himself. It says a lot about the movie that it pulled in such a talented group.
And their performances are perfect for the movie's style, you know, that over-the-top comic book feel. They get the campiness, the humor, but they also deliver those truly creepy moments.
And the visuals, wow. Creepshow is a visual feast. The colors are so vibrant, the lighting is dramatic, and those transitions between scenes, like comic book panels, it all creates this unique and memorable look.
It's like you're stepping right into a comic book, and if you know EC Comics, you'll see the inspiration everywhere. Romero nailed it, both the look and the way he tells the stories.
It's a love letter to classic horror comics, back when they pushed the limits of what was allowed and really embraced the macabre. And Creepshow brings that same gleeful morbidity to the big screen.
It's a movie that's not afraid to go over the top, to be gruesome, even a little silly sometimes. But under all those shocks and thrills, there's a real heart to Creepshow.
Yeah, it celebrates storytelling, the way a good scary story can thrill you and unsettle you all at once. And it reminds you that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we create ourselves.
Creepshow is a classic. It deserves to be in every horror fan's collection. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you scream, and it'll make you think all at the same time.
So there you have it, our deep dive into the twisted world of Creepshow. Hope you enjoyed the ride. You know, thinking back on all those segments, it really hits you how many different kinds of horror are packed into this one film. You've got your classic ghost stories, and then bam, sci-fi body horror, creature features, even psychological thrillers. It's wild.
That's what makes Creepshow such a great anthology. There's truly something for everyone. Doesn't matter if you like jump scares or, buckets of gore or that slow burn suspense. There's a segment in here that'll get to you, guaranteed.
It really is like a buffet of all things horror, right?
Yeah.
And Romero, he's the chef serving it all up with his own special blend of style and, substance. And speaking of style, we can't wrap this up without talking about a look of the film. I mean, come on.
Oh, absolutely not. Creepshow is just visually stunning from start to finish. Those colors, man, so vibrant. And the lighting, dramatic. Plus, you've got those comic big panel transitions, all those elements that just come together to create this look that's unique, unforgettable.
It's like you're walking right into a comic book, literally stepping into those pages. And for anyone out there who knows EC Comics, you'll see the inspiration everywhere. Romero totally captures that classic horror comic feel, both in how it looks and in the way the stories are told.
It's like a tribute to a whole era of horror, back when comics were pushing boundaries. They reveled in the macabre, the stuff that makes you squirm. And Creepshow brings that same kind of morbid joy, that gleeful creepiness to the big screen.
Yeah, this is a film that's totally okay with being over the top. Gruesome, sure, even a little silly sometimes. But beneath all the shocks and the scares, Creepshow has a real heart, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's a celebration of storytelling itself. It reminds us of that power a good, scary story has, the way it can thrill you and freak you out all at the same time. And it reminds you that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we make ourselves.
Perfectly put. Creepshow is a true gem, one of those horror flicks that's as fun to watch today as it was back then in 1982. If you haven't seen it, seriously check it out. You're in for a treat.
And if you're already a fan, you know what? Go watch it again. Pay attention to all the little details, all the creativity and the skill that went into making this film. It deserves to be appreciated.
Couldn't agree more. So on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive into the wild, weird world of Creepshow. We had a blast, and we hope you did too.
And hey, if you liked what you heard, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more great movie reviews. Until next time, keep those lights on!